home to unity. Heaven is here right now. Coming home to unity. Heaven is here right now. Coming home to unity. Heaven is here right now. Coming home to unity. Heaven is here right now. 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 Please stand and let us sing together from the hymnal. It's 346, and the words will be on the screen. I will leave this world as it is, go inside to find my God. I will leave this world as it is, go inside to find my God. I will leave this world as it is, go inside to find my God. I will leave this world as it is, go inside to find my God. Inside there is peace, inside there is joy, inside there is more than enough. Inside there is peace, inside there is joy, inside there is sacred love. I believe this day as it is, go inside to find my God. I believe this day as it is, go inside to find my God. I believe this day as it is, go inside to find my God. I believe this day as it is, go inside to find my God. Inside there is peace, inside there is joy, inside there is more than enough. Inside there is peace, inside there is joy, inside there is sacred love. I believe this life as it is, go inside to find my God. I believe this life as it is, go inside to find my God. Go inside to find my God. Go inside to find my God.
Now we're going to give Dean a chance to get back there and get the prayer box. We spend this time recognizing that we have prayers to send off to pray and bless over and to send off to unity. Take it from
And this is our prayer box. We keep it back there in the sanctuary so that it's available for you to write down your prayers and place them in the prayer box. The prayers will stay here in Huntsville, where they'll be prayed over for about 30 days, and then we send them to Kansas City, to Silent Unity. Well, they'll pray over them there for another 30 days. So let's just take a moment to pause, and going within, we lift up these prayers that are in this box, the prayers that are written on our hearts, in gratitude for their fulfillment to the highest good of all. And for this we say thank you, and so it is. Amen.
Now, the word,
I find time enough for all I desire to accomplish. How will I best spend my time and my resources on this beautiful spring day? I begin by remembering my spiritual inheritance, my divine faculties that provide all I need to meet any opportunity or any challenge that life presents. I also follow the example of Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore. I spring forth with a mighty faith to do the things that ought to be done by me. I use divine order to prioritize my agenda. My wisdom and understanding show me the most effective way I can complete each task. I use strength and zeal to maintain my energy and enthusiasm. Love keeps me focused on the good my efforts are accomplishing. Through the faculty of elimination, I release whatever I discern is not mine to do. And from Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Him who strengthens me.
now continue in the silence of our own being, go deeper in, reach that spiritual center that each of us has, and we will say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. Continue in silence, go deeper. Allow the day that is outside to penetrate in. And as Dean said earlier, all is well with all is beautiful. Not only is the day beautiful, but I am beautiful. Allow that beauty to fill your body. From head all the way down to your toes. Let that beauty fill each cell, each atom, each wave of energy that makes up our body. Allow beauty and spirit to fill us throughout. And as we are allowing the beauty, the spiritual essence to fill us, let us move to the silence, to the deep, deep silence. Now let us return, keeping that beauty and spiritual energy to come back to this room. we invite Terry to come share with us. Terry?
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everyone doing today?
Absolutely wonderful.
It is so nice to see all your smiling faces. It's been about 4 years since I was here last. And Cliff mentioned about Living Truth 365, so let me share with you what that's about. Roughly 3.5 years ago, we celebrated our 3rd anniversary this August. My wife Sharon and I started a spiritual center called Living Truth 365. The spiritual center, at least the name, came from the vision that I had when we were both in ministerial school. One of the things we had to do was put together a business plan for our ministry. And that was the name that I had chosen for my spiritual center that I intended to start, which I never actually did, until my wife came up with the idea at one point, do you want to start a church? And I'm like, no, I don't think so, that's a lot of work. And then she came back to me another time and said, do you want to start a church? No, I don't think so, it's a lot of work. And so she came back to me another time and said, do you want to start a church? And then it dawned on me, dummy, she wants to start a spiritual center because there are people that she wants to serve. And I said, sure, let's do it. And we did, and as I said, we celebrated our 3rd anniversary back in August, and I'm back here now. We've gotten things up and running pretty well. We've got a couple of associate ministers, we have someone speaking today, and we felt good enough about things to be able to leave things in their hands, knowing that all is in divine order and that all will be taken care of. So we'll see what happens when we get back. We'll watch the live stream, but I know that all is in order. So, as I mentioned, we started this. I haven't been here for a while, and the thing that I want to do before I go any further, usually when I get up and talk, I say to everyone, I want to remind you that you are living truth. And that has a dual meaning to it, actually. The word living can be an adjective or it can be a verb. So living, you are living truth, as in you are made in the image and likeness of God. God is absolute truth, and that is what you're reflecting as your potential out into the world. So you are living truth in the sense of the being that you are. But that's only the potential. In order for you to recognize that, you have to do the verb and actually live the truth that you know. And I want to remind you about that and make sure that you remind yourself each and every day to live truth and to be living truth. So the last time that I was here, Reverend Carol Landry was the spiritual director, and I understand that she's gone on and retired now. So I can kind of relate to that because later on this month I'll be turning 62. And I'm thinking back that it was about 50 years ago, the first time that I asked somebody to be my girlfriend. So I'm in 6th grade, and my best friend at school, Matt Caldwell, kind of goosed me up to talk to this girl, Mary Morrow. She was what we thought was the finest girl in the classroom. And Matt was supposed to talk to this girl named Gwendolyn White, and we had another friend named Fred, and I can't remember who he was supposed to talk to. But we planned this thing out for months. We would get together and we'd talk about techniques to be able to talk to the girl. And Mac actually lived next to Johnson C. Smith University, where he had this person that was rooming with his family. And that person was in college. We were like 11, 12 years old. And we called him the Wizard. And the Wizard was giving him lessons on how to talk. And Mac would come back and share with us. So finally, I get up the nerve one day, I go in the phone book. Now y'all remember what white pages are, don't you? Yes. So I knew Mary's last name and about where she lived. I found her in the phone book. And I picked up the phone and I called her up. And back in those days, or at least where we live, when you wanted to ask a girl to go steady with you, you'd ask them to give you a chance. Now give you a chance to do what, I don't know. But I called and I asked if she'd give me a chance. And she said, well, I've got a boyfriend already, so I'm going to have to turn you down. And I remember saying to her, okay, well, would you please keep this between me and you? Because I was embarrassed. And the next morning I went in to go to school, and I see a bunch of girls standing around and nudging each other and starting to giggle. And I'm like, oh my God, she's told everybody. I walk over to some of the guys, and they're like, I heard you called Mary Morrow up yesterday and asked her to give you a chance. And she rejected you, and that was my first romantic rejection. So with the guys, however, they were like, yeah, right on, that's the thing to do. And it like raised my stature up amongst my friends. So that first romantic experience for me wasn't such a bad one in terms of rejection, because I wasn't as emotionally involved with it the way that some people might be when you've really got a crush on somebody, but I was more embarrassed. And it taught me something, that when you face a rejection or a disappointment, that it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. So, Unity on the Mountain, here's what I want to ask you this morning. How do you handle rejection when you face it? How do you handle disappointments? How do you handle setbacks? How do you handle things when they're not going your way? Do you get upset about it? Or do you see this as an opportunity for you to grow spiritually, for you to advance yourself? So, I'm going to be working with a scripture this morning that many of you are probably familiar with, and it is the story of Cain and Abel. So, this comes from Genesis chapter 4, verses 3 through 8. And David, if you can put on the slideshow for me, I'm going to ask you to advance it as we go along. So we're going to talk about rejecting rejection. It ain't always personal. And it's when we make it personal that we start to get into our ego, or what Charles Fillmore refers to as the Adam Man. And we start to do things that we shouldn't do that can retard our spiritual growth. So if you'll go to the next slide, and if you'll advance this along as I read the scripture. So I'm reading from the Lamb's Aramaic translation. It reads, "And in the course of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of the fatlings thereof. And the Lord was pleased with Abel and his offering. But with Cain and his offering he was not pleased. So Cain was exceedingly displeased, and his countenance was sad. And the Lord said to Cain, Why are you displeased? And why is your countenance sad? Behold, if you do well, shall you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door. You should return to your brother, and he shall be subject to you. And Cain said to his brother Abel, Let us go to the plain. And it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him." So now I think that we all are probably familiar at least with the basics of the story. And there are a few things that I want to examine about this before we get into the lesson proper. And one of the things are some of the traditional ways that we look at this. This is like one of the oldest stories of sibling rivalry. You know, where you've got two brothers that seem to be in competition with one another. And one gets angry or gets envious when this father-like figure rejects what he's done and accepts the younger brother. So I'm the baby of my family, and I can kind of relate to this because I've got an older brother, and at times it seems like our life has kind of been competitive. Especially when we were younger, he would take great pains to let me know he was the older one. And being 5 years older than me, I wasn't able to do but so much with him physically until I got to be older and adult. And then at that point, what sense did it make? But you got this rivalry, and for those of you that have siblings, I'm sure you know what it's like. And probably some of you are still going through that sibling rivalry with your siblings. So we've got this idea of sibling rivalry, but there's another subtle message in this that you may not get from it, that we usually don't talk about. Cain was a farmer. Abel was a shepherd. And when we take a look at the story and the ancient Israelites, they were shepherds, they were nomadic people. So this is kind of a moral judgment that we've got that is going on between farmers and shepherds. And we don't think about that very much now because most of us live in an urban environment and we don't work on farms or we don't raise cattle or anything like that. But this was a real issue, especially in ancient times, about who was going to use the land and be able to consume the resources. This is the ancient Israelites' way of kind of doing like a backhanded slap at the people who were farmers. Because Cain, as a farmer, was the one who was not in favor. And if you look at the way that they have worded how they describe the process, Cain just gave his offering. It's like, here God, just take this, whatever it is. But Abel was very deliberate about what he did. He gave the firstborn and he gave the fatlings, he gave the better. So I just want you to be aware of this historically as part of the story and what it is that people mean or what they think about when they are telling the story. You know, we in New Thought use the Bible metaphysically. We don't really interpret it literally for the most part. And the thing that I want to make sure you're aware of is that this is not a literal story. This is what we call an allegory. It's a story that's meant to present a message, to give you an idea about something, and we're going to dig into that message in a little bit. So let's take a look at the story and break it down verse by verse. So I'm going to ask you to back up one. Let me see where we are with the slides. Okay, so you can go forward 2 slides. Okay, here we go. So I want to focus on the highlighted area that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground and offering to the Lord. When you look in the Old Testament in particular, you're going to see the word Lord, and it's all capitalized. So just as a point of reference, that is a substitution that's used for the name of God, which has 4 Hebrew vowels, or 4 Hebrew letters rather, that we don't know exactly how to pronounce. We think that it's Yahweh, but that has gotten lost over time. That name was supposed to be so sacred they didn't want to put it in writing so you'll see the Lord. Now metaphysically, we can take for the word Lord and substitute law, and that will give us a deeper understanding of the scripture. In fact, there's a book written by a man named Raymond Hollowell called Working with the Law, that he tells us that law is another name for God. And that when we work with the law, we're working with principle, not with something that's arbitrary, that can be swayed back and forth, but that there is principle. There's love also. But if you work with the law in a particular way, you can expect to get certain results. We commonly will call that the law of cause and effect. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about here now, about looking at this story, not so much from a literal point of view, but from the perspective of cause and effect, and what may be happening with Cain and with his brother Abel. I looked in the dictionary to take a look at the meaning of the word offering. The word offering has several meanings, but the one that I want to focus on is a religious sacrifice or token of devotion. So we do our religious offerings. At some point, I imagine you're going to take up an offering here. And this is something that we're giving out of our bounty, out of what it is that we value. In effect, it's giving a piece of ourselves. And so Cain is making an offering to the Lord or to the law. I'd like for you to consider that everything that you do is an offering to the Lord or to the law. Every action that you take, every thought that you think, everything that you do is an offering to the law. Our thoughts are things, and I took a look on your website yesterday to kind of browse around a little bit, and I see that you have posted the 5 foundational principles of New Thought. Everybody states it a little bit differently, but one of the principles is the value and the power of thought. And so our thoughts and our actions that we're offering into the universe eventually come back to us through the law of cause and effect. And those thoughts that we send out are going to be very important for us metaphysically for the lives that we create for ourselves. So when we took a look at Cain, I think that Cain was somewhat nonchalant about his offering. It says that he gave an offering of the ground. There was nothing special or thoughtful about it. And it makes me feel as if Cain had gotten to be in a sense of feeling of entitlement, that he believed that he was relying on himself and his own efforts to produce the results that he wanted, rather than recognizing God as his source. And many of us do that, especially those of us who are still working. We believe that our job is our source. Or we may believe that our parents, if we get an allowance, is our source. And what ends up happening is we end up relying on circumstances to satisfy and gratify us and to have our sense of worth rather than getting our sense of worth intrinsically from the Christ within. So he gives this offering that I think that he didn't give very much thought for, and that he took for granted, and that he did kind of out of a sense of duty. You know, it's expected, so I'm going to do it, but I'm not really into this. So David, if you can go to the next slide, let me see. Yes. This says, if you take an action because you have to, then there is no way that you're going to do your best. Then it is better not to do it. So if you're just going through the motions, you're not truly giving with your heart. You're not truly giving from the heart, and you're not giving your best. Next one, David. So we look at Abel and what he did. He gave the firstborn of his flock and the fatlings thereof. So metaphysically, what does it mean to give your firstborn? Because I don't think that for those of you that have children, that you want to give your firstborn, or maybe some of you do, that the kids are getting on your nerves so badly. Are you the firstborn?
I'm the firstborn.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No, the way she looked.
Now, by the way, at Living Truth, we've got a small, intimate community like you've got here. And we're used to having people give us some feedback. So if there's anything that I say that you might like to give some feedback about, or ask a question for clarification, feel free to do so. I don't feel like that I have to own the stage up here and that you must be quiet and I will give you my pearls of wisdom, because I don't really know that much. I'm only talking with what Spirit is giving to me. So at any rate, when we talk about the firstborn, what that has to do is how you prioritize and create order in your life. Are you putting first things first? We are each spiritual beings here in a temporary human experience. And I don't know what religious tradition that you may have come to before you came to Unity, but probably you were taught the other thing, the other way, that we're human beings having a sometimes spiritual experience when we go to church, or when we go to Bible study on Wednesdays. But the rest of the time, we're just out here having this human experience, and we hope that God is going to intervene with what we've got going on and show us favor. And that's a big thing that you hear many of the televangelists speak of, about the favor of God. Well, here's the news that I've got for you. God favors those who favor God. And if you recognize that your every action and your every thought is a spiritual action and thought, you recognize that you are here to develop in this earthly plane, to recognize who you are as a spiritual being, and that every opportunity that you have to interact with people is an opportunity for you to recognize the Christ within and to express it in what you do. And if you're not doing that, then you're missing the opportunity for your spiritual growth and for you to get the lessons that you need to develop spiritually along your spiritual path. So in being here as a spiritual being, each of us came into this world to serve a purpose. And perhaps it may be many purposes. Some of us have come here to be parents. Some of us have come here to be ministers or preachers. Some of us have come here to be the person that sweeps up and keeps things clean. But everything has a purpose, and everything is necessary and needed to make this world operate and to operate in order. And so if you've got a purpose, and you're not about that purpose, as Jesus said, I am about my Father's business. And if what you're doing is not being about your Father's business, then you're not giving up the firstborn, those first thoughts about what you think and what you do. You're not bringing that forward, and you're not going to be able to give your best. And that brings to the second point, the fatlings thereof. The fatlings, when it comes to a herd, are the most desirable ones, because, at least for those of you who eat meat, you know that fat helps to give that extra taste. right?
Yes.
And so you don't want a lean piece of meat like that that has no fat. You want something that's got the taste to it. It's the same thing with us. We want to have our priorities straight so that we're giving our first efforts on the things that are important, on the things that matter to our purpose, why we are here on the planet, what it is that we're here to do. And it does not have to be something that's grandiose, something big. I mentioned about the person that sweeps the floor. If that person doesn't sweep the floor, we're going to have to all walk through a lot of garbage and through things that are unpleasant. And so their contribution, their offering, so to speak, is just as important as the person that makes a big donation of money. Because you can get the money and that money can be gone tomorrow. But the person that helps to maintain things, that's just as important too. So you should never feel like whatever it is that you're offering or whatever you're giving is insignificant. It may be insignificant to somebody else, but it is what you're giving of spirit from the Christ within that you're giving and sharing to the world. It's your light. And because your light shines, does not diminish my light. If our light, if each of us let our light shine, one does not diminish the other, but rather when we put that brightness together, it can light up the world and transform it. And especially with the way that things are going now politically in our country and across the world, we need that light to bring hope and love into our world. So the other thing that I want you to understand is that Abel was not worried about his title or his position. You know, sometimes we get caught up on, I'm the boss, or I'm the dad, or I'm the mother. And we think that people should be giving us respect just based on that title. And we're taught to do that very often, that respect your elders, respect your mother and your father, and we should. But you know, the thing is that whatever it is that we do, it's not about what it is that I've done, what's in the past. I can't sit on my laurels and have a sense of entitlement, but it's what I do and what I bring forward each and every day. That's me bringing the Christ out in myself that I'm sharing with you that's going to be meaningful to you. Yes, I may build up some capital with you by what I've done. But at some point, I have to keep moving. I have to keep growing. I have to keep developing. And if I'm not doing that, I'm not honoring the spiritual journey that I'm here on. And if you don't do it, neither are you. So next slide, please. So this is talking about doing your best. When you do your best, you learn to accept yourself. And that was a problem with Cain. Cain didn't really accept himself. He was insecure. But you have to be aware and learn from your mistakes. Learning from your mistakes means you practice. Look honestly at the results and keep practicing. This increases your awareness. And both of these quotes are from Don Miguel Ruiz from the Four Agreements, for those of you who are familiar with the book. So Cain's reaction was to be hurt, and that hurt was a bruise to his ego. That part of us that believes that we're human beings, and that we've got to scuffle and be better than other people so that we can get some limited resource, because everybody can't share, right? There's not enough to go around, and if you have yours, I can't get mine. Or at least that's what we're taught. But in truth, we know that there is an abundant supply for everything and for everybody. But it's up to each of us to learn how to draw that supply into our lives. Nobody is going to give you anything or should have to give you anything because they weaken you. And in this spiritual faculty of strength for the month of March, it's not only us learning to have physical strength, but it's to have that spiritual strength, that mental strength, that endurance, that ability to be able to accept criticism, rejection, to accept disappointment, and to get the lessons that we need to work our way through it. So I mentioned to you that I was reading from the Lambda Aramaic translation, and that's the Bible that we use at Living Truth. The reason that we use it is, I don't know how many of you are familiar, but there was a man named George Lamsa, and he had a relationship actually with the people in Unity and with religious science, where he was bringing a Bible that he translated directly out of Aramaic, which is the language that Jesus and the other people that you learn about in the Bible actually spoke. And as the story goes, their scriptures had been pretty much kept separate from the rest of the world for centuries and centuries. The ones that we commonly use, especially the King James Version, have gone through different translations and by people who are not Aramaic-speaking people. So some of the idioms they may not have translated quite properly. They may have translated them literally, but because they didn't understand them, they didn't get the context of what they meant. And so they may have projected something out to people that may not have been the intent. So that's where we use the Lamsa Aramaic translation, because he spoke both English and Aramaic, which was his native language. And we think that it's a truer translation. But whatever you use, it's fine. In this instance, I really prefer the King James Version. And I'll tell you why. In the King James it says, "And Cain became wroth, and his countenance dropped." So I took a look at the word wroth to see what it means. It means twisted. It means snakes. So you can imagine somebody, not just that they got angry or they were displeased, but they got twisted when they got criticized, when what they had to give was rejected. How many of you get twisted when somebody rejects what you have to give them? How many of you get wroth and get yourself all bent out of shape when even the most minor of things happen? Somebody cuts you off in traffic, and oh boy, we just carry on. There's so-and-so and so-and-so. Words I can't use here or in any place, with any church or any kind of a temple that I wouldn't use. But we have these thoughts that we think, and we get twisted up and turned around. And then when you talk about his countenance dropped, like his face dropped, it's not just that he was displeased, but it's like he slumped because this thing hit him so hard. Now, I want you to understand that when we're reading this, we're not talking about a God way out there. This is a conversation that Cain is having internally in consciousness. And he is struggling with this idea of whether he is a human being with these feelings or whether he is a spiritual being that has the ability to be able to overcome this rejection and criticism. Actually, and I'm going to get to this a little bit later on in more depth, Cain and Abel are aspects of our consciousness. Because the way that Cain may have reacted is the way that many of us may react when we run into situations where we feel that we've been rejected, where we've been disappointed. Some of us may have been in a position that we had a job that was a good paying job for many, many years, and all of a sudden it's become obsolete because of technology or a merger, and we can't find a new job because they just don't exist anymore. Or we can't find a job paying the same kind of money that we were making. And so we sit back and we cross our arms and say, something's wrong with these people and it's not me. I'm going to be angry, I'm going to be upset, and I'm going to do everything I can to mess with everybody around me because I'm just an unhappy individual. Or perhaps you've been in a relationship for a while and your lover says to you, the loving just ain't quite as good as it used to be. And we take that personally. Or perhaps your children come to you and say, you know what? You never spent any time with me. I don't need to give you respect because you were never there for me. And we think just because we've been there and we worked hard that we're entitled to certain things. But that feeling of hurt, that can cut us to the quick. And if we're not careful, it will keep us down and keep us bitter, where we won't be able to prosper, we won't be able to be abundant, and we won't be able to live the life that we were designed to live when we came here. So my question for you, Unity on the Mountain, is do you know your priorities? Do you know your purpose in life? Do you know why you are here on the planet? And if you don't know, are you seeking that information? Are you turning to the Christ within to ask the question, how can I serve? How can I be better? How can I project and express the divinity of who I am? Or are you focused on things externally that, oh, if I have a certain type of job, it's going to make me be an important person. I'm important because I drive a Mercedes. I'm important because I'm the CEO of a certain organization. I'm important because I'm the pastor of a mega church. Are you feeding the ego, or are you looking within to the Christ within and having that light shine out into the universe, knowing that as you do that, you will be more than adequately compensated with all those things and much more? So David, if you'll go to the next slide. I have here a definition of best. It means that we give the most excellent, effective, or desirable type of quality. That we do something to the highest degree, and that which is most excellent, outstanding, and desirable. So here's what I want you to know. The best that you give today may not be the best that you're able to give tomorrow. Sometimes as you're striving to do your best and to be your best, there are some days that you can do better. And that's all that you can do. You can do better, and you should do better. And there are other days that you may not be able to give as much or do as much. Your energy level is not as high. The demands on your time just make it impossible for you to give the same level of your best in that particular moment. But sometimes your best is saying to the person, I can't do this right now. Can we get together and do this later? Because what you need from me is important, and I can't give it the attention it deserves. Or do we feel as if we can't be wrong, or that we can't be seen in a certain way, that we've got to put on a front and try to impress people? Being able to be honest and authentic about where you are and what you're able to do means that you're comfortable with who you are. You're comfortable with how you're expressing, and you don't mind letting people know that I can't do this. At least not right now. Let's find another way to do it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So here is the law talking back to Cain. Behold, if you do well, shall you not be accepted? When you give your best, when you do well, will you not be accepted? Now there are going to be some people out there that we'll call haters. They're going to hate on you no matter what you do. And they're not going to like you because you're not one of their people. You may not be from the same background. They may not like you because of your gender, your sexual orientation, the country that you came from. They're just not going to give you a chance. So we're just going to bless those people and bless them right on out of our lives. And send them on their way with love and find some people that want to play with the rules that we want to play with. So that's a tip for you. You don't have to play a game by somebody else's rules. Quit and take your basketball and go to a different court. Be around people of like mind. And when you give your best, they will accept you for who you are. And that really is enough that you're giving your best and you're being your best and doing your best. But if you don't, the scripture warns us that sin lies at the door. And we know in New Thought, sin is not just this bunch of rules, but it is error thinking. It is a misalignment of our consciousness with the consciousness of the Christ consciousness. It's believing in shortages and lack. It's believing that you're not healthy. It's believing that we have to be in conflict. It's believing that if you've got yours, I can't get mine. But when we align our minds with truth, we know that there's abundance of supply, and that we just have to be the conduit for it to come through. We know that there can be no sin, sickness, or death, because in God we live and move and have our being. But it's up to us to be able to stand on that truth and to make that demonstration, that reality in our lives, what we affirm as being the truth. To use faith to draw that into our lives, from the invisible to the visible. Now, I didn't highlight it, but at the end of this it says that you should return to your brother, and he shall be subject to you. So, Cain, being the older one in the Jewish tradition, is the one who would inherit everything from the father. All of the land, has the right to basically run things and to have authority over his brother. In consciousness, when we're here in this human existence, the ego is the limiting faculty that we have for how well we're able to express the Christ within. And so to that extent, to the extent that we're able to have our ego placed at bay, or to pull it back and to let the Christ through and to exercise faith, to that extent, the Christ is subject to us. Now that doesn't diminish the Christ within or God at all, it's always there. But our awareness of it and our ability to be able to utilize our connection to it, that is subject to us as human beings. And if we don't, then we move on to the next piece. And let's see, go to the next one, David. And Cain said to Abel, his brother, let's go to the plain. Especially in the New Testament, when you see anything about plain, it represents a low level of consciousness. Now you'll see other times where it talks about that Abram went up into the mountains. Abram is going up in consciousness and spiritual awareness. But Cain has gone down to a low level of consciousness. And he's taken his brother, Abel, with him, the one that wants to do the best and show his best with him. And he kills Abel. And we do that when we allow our consciousness to be drawn down to a low level of consciousness, that we kill off that part of us that's willing and able to do our best. Because we're not connecting with that, with the Christ within. We're connecting with the pain that we feel. We're connecting with the limitation. We're connecting with negativity. And we believe that our circumstances run our lives and run the world. But for those of us that are in truth, we know that we can always, no matter what's going on or where we are in the world, we can always turn within and find the Christ, Spirit, Divine Mind, whatever it is that you call it, and that it's always there with you. That you can turn to it for the guidance that you want, the guidance that you desire, for whatever it is that you need, and that it will be there for you and guide you. I want to share something with you, especially about this idea of consciousness and us needing to be able to compete with other people, the sibling rivalry or the rivalry that we have amongst different groups or with different people. Did any of you see the movie The Great Debaters? Anybody? No?
No.
Oh, it is a wonderful movie. It stars Denzel Washington. And it is about a group, I don't remember the name of the college. They were in Texas. This was in the early 1900s. And it was a group of young black kids that formed a debate team, and they went to compete eventually against the team at Harvard. So it shows the discrimination that they went through and the different issues that they faced. But there's this wonderful scene where Denzel Washington, who's the teacher, the coach, is drilling them. And he has them with some sort of like a walnut or something in their mouths. And he says to them, "Who is the judge?" And they reply, "God is the judge." And the coach says, "Why is God the judge?" "Because God decides who wins or loses, not my opponent." Denzel says, "Who's your opponent?" "He does not exist. He's only a dissenting voice to the truth I speak." So Unity on the Mountain, I'm going to say to you, anything that's out there is merely a dissenting voice to the truth that you speak. Speak your truth. Speak the truth. Stand on your truth and live your truth, knowing that all is in divine order and that all is well. And when you do, Spirit will provide for you everything that you need. And so it is.
Amen.
Thank you, Gary.
So let's stand and sing together. The red book is 322. I am free. I am unlimited. I am free. I am unlimited. There are no chains that bind me. I am free. I am unlimited. Right now. Right now. I am free.